I invite you to let go, sit back, and be in peace however you need to while you listen to the following words as they settle into your body. We have come together today with one heartbeat, pulsing blood into our communities through bodies of trees and rivers of mountains. Drinking from the lips of oceans, we breathe life into the nostrils of our sister amphibians, our brother lions. They exhale. We, the silent roar, boom, stillness. Our cells shed and rebuild Earth's skin, expanding and contracting oneness. And our babies grow as the collective womb weeps its still births that pass the hands of death, fallen through the cracks of our shaken faith. How then do we close the gap between fingers that struggle to maintain grip with our seeming other? To reduce the death of unborn dreams, scared of being dropped before life has even been lifted? Up as the sun sets time and time and time again, will we as one finally learn how to say goodbye? Thank you. Why is saying goodbye so difficult? A few years ago, I had to say goodbye to a cat on the road. Driving home in my 3/4-ton diesel guzzler, suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, a cat leaps directly into my truck, or at my truck. Having never hit an animal before, I ran out of the car, dropped to my knees, and sobbed. This weeping that came out of me was of another world, or rather an awakening of an inner world that could not cope with the responsibility of losing such innocence. As I looked into this species' eyes as it asked me for help, a piece of me died. The owners of the cat walked out of the house as the cat grasped for its last breath. They looked at me softly and said, "Please don't be sad. Don't worry. We have other cats. We're okay." They then proceeded to move the cat to the side of the road and leave. There were no tears, no ritual of goodbye, no goodbye. I was shocked and dismayed at how they could simultaneously give me empathy while so easily dismissing another creature. At the brink of death, I saw with my own eyes that this precious cat was also at the brink of life. I felt helpless. I found myself overwhelmed by guilt, the guilt of not knowing what to do, the confusion and shame of wondering if my own sadness was out of place and was somehow inappropriate. Did I have a right to mourn? Did this cat have a right to breathe? And did either of us fully have the right to live? Joanna Macy, eco-philosopher, embraces death as a part of our great turning, a time where we begin to love this life more deeply by valuing all that it has to offer. She writes, "It's not surprising that in every spiritual tradition, there is somewhere near the center that practice, that recollection, that yes, death is at my side, and death can give me back this moment. The awareness of death is full of astonishing freshness, pristine clarity. It strips away the trivial. Walking with an awareness of death offers a profound richness." How then do we cultivate an awareness of death? As a child, I remember watching Disney movies such as Bambi and the Jungle Book and feeling a likeness with the animals personified. While this anthropomorphic way of seeing the world is yet another example of violence done by humans, these sketched deers and animated cartoon snakes gave me just enough permission to see animals as something beyond fueling my own needs. After all, how was I to make sense of another species that had a personality and soul, yet were not the masters of this kingdom? If I could experience their death and feel impacted by their loss, then what did that mean about my own connection to them and my own placement in this larger world? Looking at themes in these movies, it made me wonder if death makes all of us more compelled to live. How many stories have we heard of people looking death in the eye and then suddenly feeling a rush of life at that exact moment when death knocks at their door? It makes me wonder, what is it in us that feels life even in death? Janice L. Dickinson writes in her article, The People Paradox, about the anxiety that humans have around death when dealing with global climate change. She uses Ernest Becker's work to describe humans' shaky relationship with death and how we, as meaning-seeking creatures, look towards something greater than ourselves to help us cope with our own mortality, even if that means repressing it. The fear of death, because it is so painful, ultimately causes more death, because fear makes us act in ways that are not life-creating. Trying to make sense of how, as humans, we can see ourselves as part of a much greater system while also denying the reality of our own ending. Dickinson asks questions such as, what does it mean to preserve the wilderness and to be in the world with wildlife? What does it mean to be without it and to lose even one species? With consciousness comes a will to touch the world, and with this, perhaps there is a vicarious sense of loss with another living species disappears. Understanding how our fear of death hinders our environmental impact in progress. I have to believe we have a thirst to find the richness of death, and therefore life, present in the midst of today's environmental crisis. In this time of great uncertainty, as we struggle to survive violence rising due to global warming, as global warming rises due to our violence, this world is grasping for clean air. And we are dying to inhale. I believe we're at a period in time where we are being asked to awaken to this deep inner world within each of us that is begging to be made conscious. It is at this place where we know that death doesn't exclude those made invisible, the beings of life that have been oppressed, exploited, violated, Disneyfied. And I believe the sacredness of life will only be touched when we, as humans, see ourselves in the image of all life and not vice versa. And this will happen when we choose to enter into full communion with that which binds all life. I mean, does not a tree, a bee, and a human being experience life and death? I am sad that we are brought up in a world that makes cartoons out of our mortality, that the only way we are allowed to consider our sister amphibians and brother lions is by making them caricatures of humanity. But it isn't too late. There is still time to give ourselves permission to weep for the cats that cross our paths, the doe in the fields and the jungles of our childhood. But to do so requires creative ways to mourn our own death so that we can quickly come to terms with the consumer engine that drives these final breaths of innocence out of this world. And to do this, we must enact death rituals, finding ways to say goodbye. Joanna Macy offers a ritual that we can turn to immediately, which she calls the Council of All Beings, which is, and I quote, a communal ritual in which participants step aside from their human identity and speak on behalf of another life form. It aims to heighten awareness of our interdependence in the living body of Earth and to strengthen our commitment to defend it. The ritual serves to help us acknowledge and give voice to the suffering of our world. This council of being is one way to hear our roar boom into the stillness needed to reverse our Earth's calamity. To speak for another life form is to walk miles in the shoes of the greater part of this larger system. It seeks to honor the life cycles that makes a cypress tree and a human being far more alike than dissimilar. It is to honor life by honoring death. Given the facts, we know on many conscious levels that the earth is preparing for the great funeral because we still are searching for tools to bring to awareness this beautiful, sacred, and all too common reality of death. We have Disneyfied death because our society doesn't make sacred life. As Janice Dickinson suggests, we have created destructive myths that actually cause us to hurt ourselves in order to survive our own fear of life. How then, as a group of spiritual and environmental leaders, do we cultivate relevant death rituals and work with myths in a way that sensitizes us to all life, rejecting guilt and shame by instead upholding every being's right to wholeness? How do we face the glorious truth that death is also what makes this world so beautiful and so alive and so worth saving? Is it not through death that we are able to live? Are we not at every moment also on the brink of life? Given our fear of death, which shakes our faith and leads us to act in opposition of our deep love affair with life, how do we learn to say goodbye and walk with an awareness of death so that when the sun sets time and time and time again, we will continue to be blessed with a million more good mornings? Taking wisdom from the Disney classic Bambi, I quote, "Everything in the forest has its season. Where one thing falls, another grows. Maybe not what was there before, but something new and wonderful all the same." So as you leave here today, ask yourself, how will you learn to say goodbye so that all of us can say good morning and grow into something new and wonderful all the same together?